What is the root cause, do you think, which happens and due to which this? In this case, we are just reducing. We are generating an action on the server side, right? Without the interaction of the user. So here the amount is being transferred. In another case, we can change the profile of the user. In another case, we can create a new user, etc., etc. So why is this happening? Action is easy to recreate. Okay, that is one. But that is from the attacker side. It is easy to recreate that particular URL. But what is the root cause? Why is this happening? Okay, how? Okay, same origin policy. Sorry? Right. But we are on another domain. We are at eWorld's greetings.
Yeah, the source code of that page contains a link. The source code of this page contains a link that
triggers an action on the server.
Action on the server because you're authenticated there and you're not using a unique token for that request.
Correct. So what is happening essentially is that on the eWorld's rating site there is an image SRC which says load an image from this place, but the image SRC is not a request for an image, but it is an action for that site. If you see this is the action. It says HTTP Hackers Bank, and if you see here it says image SRC, image, and it defines the source. The source is hackersbank.com, hackers fund transfer, do ASPX, and from to account and amount 1000. Right? But you will ask me that this browser has loaded the page of eWorld's greetings and it is sending a request to Hackers Bank. So how does single origin policy allow this request to pick up cookies of Hackers Bank? It should pick up cookies of eWorld's greetings.
It's a GET request.
The reason is that single origin policy says if a request goes from the browser, then the target server's cookies will be picked up. You are at reddit.com, xyz.com, doesn't matter. If the request goes to abc.com, the cookies of abc.com will be implicitly picked up by the browser. That is what is happening. Here the request is for an image, but it is an action on the site server and you are logged in on another browser. Hence, when the page loads, just by loading on the page, the request of the image goes to the server, picks up your cookies, logged in cookies, and does the transaction. So what is the solution to this? Unique. Okay. Anyone else? What is the solution? See for the server, the request coming from A browser or B browser doesn't matter. If I had legitimately transferred 1000 rupees, it would still accept and execute the action, right? Now it is a illegitimate request, still it is executing. Why is it executing? Because of the session. Session is stored where? In our case, in the cookie. If there was an additional parameter or a session ID which was stored either in the URL or in the hidden form field apart from the cookie, then it would resolve this problem. Right?
This attack will not work if you open eWorld from Internet Explorer.
Yes, since cross browsers do not share their session store or the cookie store, wherever cookie store is shared, this will happen. Any doubts?
Generally, images once downloaded or displayed will not be refreshed again.
Yeah, it will not be, but the first time the action will take place.
Yeah, only one time.
One time, yes.
For every time refresh.
See, in this case, yeah, every time we refresh the page loads, right?
Page loads, but the image is
not an image.
But this is not the image. See, this is not the image.
Source, when we define image source in HTML, it should be loaded from the.
It's not an image. It's going as a GET request. There's nothing to bring back and save on your hard drive. If it's a JPG or a PNG or GIF, it will come and save on your hard drive. There's nothing to save.
Generally, this thing is not clear. Some kind of concurrency also there.
Concurrency?
Because you are saying like once that user has already opened it from one browser, then from other browser it is doing. Is happening from the same machine.
Same machine, same browser. Same browser in the sense, if you have opened Mozilla, you should open the other side. See, I'll explain you the anatomy.
So that session is started from one browser.
Right.
Okay, so there should not be concurrent session for the same user ID, for the same account, sometimes some kind of restriction can be implemented.
He's getting the idea from a backend. For example, if you're logged into Access and if you open another tab, then it does not.
It's a banking knowledge.
So that is what per page session. That is the solution to this question.
Correct. Now let's say you logged into Yahoo.Gmail, okay, and you open another tab and say gmail.com. It will open your welcome page directly, right?
Yeah, it will open the inbox. But
it will open the inbox.
He's referring to a banking account, for example, right? You're coming from there.
So banking, no, I'm not referring to banking. I'm saying there may be one more solution, like additional thing. If you restrict the concurrent from the same user account that at the same time from the same browser, there's another kind of HTTP request is going.
It is very difficult from the server side to identify that what is the source of the request if it comes from a certain browser. Because what does the browser send to the server? One is the to from account details and the account. Second is the session ID. Second is the browser type. All these things are same. Whether you send it from one tab or a 10th tab. All these things are same. If suppose the server restricts based on IP address, the IP address is also the same. Everything is same in this case.
No,
Yes,
from the
from
first
server's
case,
point of view, there is nothing suspicious.
From the server side, server cannot identify whether this is a separate tab or the same tab or the same browser or a different browser.
I understood, but I think it can be like in the first go, when the legitimate user has opened his account and then from the same browsers that you are doing. Now, when you have implemented this per page token and all, so from that application side, I think some checks should be there. Okay, from the same kind of user ID, from the same token, something like parallel should not it should not do any kind of
Correct.
transaction or any kind of changes in that.
Correct. So that is what happens actually.
That's the solution.
What he said.
There is a solution.
There is a solution. Correct. So how does this solution work where we add the hidden form field or URL form? See, the default action of the browser is to search for cookies in the cookie store or cookie cache, whatever you call it. Pick up, attach to the request and send it. But if the first browser, the legitimate browser, had a hidden form field, the second browser instance cannot pick up that hidden form field because it is a separate document. The document here and document here is different. If I were to access this hidden form field, I would say document dot, say text box or hidden form field name dot value. But if same was done here, this cannot access that. But both instances can access the cookie cache or the store. Hence, only relying on cookies will lead to this attacks. Alright? So, CSRF is done. Because all these are theory. I think the idea is clear. So, we can use image, SRC script, SRC, iframe, SRC, anything. And it will help us in executing a CSRF tag. Cross-site scripting or
if your website is vulnerable to cross-site scripting, then adding a token in a hidden field will not help you, right?
yes, it will not. So, combination of XSS and CSRF is extremely dangerous.
So what would be the remediation? So let's say if your website is vulnerable to cross-site scripting and you have a CSRF, so what would be a very good remediation for that?
One is input validation, second is adding page token. Both.
Adding page token, let's say so my website is vulnerable to cross-site scripting and I have a CSRF attack, but cross-site scripting is, you can't, there are so many pages are vulnerable to cross-site scripting, but I need a remediation for CSRF. So what would be a best possible remediation?
See, one is for critical transactions, assuming that you do not know XSS is there and an attacker knows it, right? So, for CSRF and for restricted actions, it is ideal to re-authenticate the user.
I think Yahoo does that.
Yahoo does that. So many sites do it. For example, you go to your profile, you want to change your password, it asks you your password. You want to edit your profile, it asks you your password. Similar for most of the critical sites. So it re-authenticates, assigns a new session ID. So then that could help.
One more question, like not presenting, like since your company does whenever does that this audit, so you do the audit as well as you give the solution also.
We from a design perspective, we don't go and give a code solution, but we say these are the measures.
Okay.
So for example, what we are discussing, we go into couple of steps more in detail. We say these are the solutions, these are the reference links, and these are the concepts.
That's what kind of documentation you provide that your application has been audited against these checks. You mentioned clearly.
Exactly, that is what I'll come to. How does a customer know that his application has been tested against all possible risks? So that is one of the concerns of any customer. Okay, we've got two other. We need to close. Okay. See, there are two other things which I was to talk about: STP response splitting and STP verb tampering. Okay, which are simple concepts. Since we've discussed the building blocks, I think it will be easy for us to understand. Anyway, my email I have published in the last slide. You can always contact me. We can discuss on it in detail. But I thought it was required to go into certain specifics. Hence, it took time. If I assumed that you all know web application security, I could have gone into straightforward into the concept, into the attacks. But I spent, I think, a little more time on the concept and the discussion, which I hope was useful. I'm not sure. That is my perspective. So STP response splitting, STP verb tampering, these are not difficult attacks, at least after knowing all these concepts. You can read that. In case there is any doubt, we can discuss that. I will take you directly through this, which would be more interesting, the methodology of penetration testing that we follow, or for that matter, many companies follow. See, there are two ways by which you can test an application. One is launch a tool. It randomly goes to each URL and throws SQL injection, cross-site scripting, blah blah, and covers it. Same can be done by a manual tester. He goes to the application, sees a text box, starts SQL injection, cross-site scripting, logs into the application, then does A, B, C, D, everything. But then after 5 days, neither the tester nor the tool is sure that they have covered everything. Okay, and neither the customer is, or neither the application owner is sure that all tests were included. So how do we do that? We do that by creating something called as the threat profile, the number 2. Okay. A threat profile does not presume that the application is safe or unsafe for that matter. It understands the flow of the application and lists down all the possible threats. I will give you an example. For example, this room. If I were to test this room, just test for its resilience, its availability, etc. Forget web application security. I would consider not only fire, I would consider earthquake, I would consider, say, bombing, I would consider, say, people coming in and making some nuisance, etc., etc. So I will make a list of all possible threats. Then I will start negating each. For example, let's say Pune is not prone to floods. For example. Then flood, though I have listed down in the threat profile, I will negate it, say safe. Then the next thing, safe. Then the next thing, safe. Then the next thing, unsafe. So it is about listing down all possible threats. Let's say the account details page of a banking site, right? The accounts detail page of a banking site will be vulnerable to one. I am able to see the details of another user, right? I am able to manipulate my own data, right? I am able to inject SQL injection in the account number field, or inject some malicious data. Now, when we are creating this threat profile, we do not do it technically. We do it purely from a business side. That what action would cause harm to the business, right? So we have a laundry list and we just make it. Till now we don't test it. Once this laundry list is complete, we get it reviewed from the customer, saying that do you foresee any other risks to your application from the business side? Now, if I had listed down your like SQL injection in login page, XSS in login page, the customer will not understand anything. What I will list down is a malicious user can bypass authentication in your application. A malicious user can gain the privilege of another user, is what I will list down. So when the customer sees, who is a non-technical guy, he will say, okay, this is my possible risk, this is my possible risk, this is my possible risk. Or he will suggest, I have 2 more risks. For each business risks, which is listed down in the threat profile, we may have multiple test cases. For example, bypassing authentication can be done by SQL injection, can be done by session hijacking using cross-site scripting, can be done by using CSRF, can be done by using sniffing, can be done by breaking the password if in case they are using MD5 hash, by reverse or by whatever comparison and finding out the clear text, so on and so forth. So just one business risk, which is bypassing authentication, will be tested using 5 technical risks. So similarly, we will have a longer list, and out of that, essentially after 4 days, I will know that out of 100 checks I have completed, 60-40 are remaining. Tomorrow, if we are giving a finding that 7 issues are there, we can also show the customer that 93 issues are not there. That is where the actual confidence of the customer comes in from the auditor's perspective. Customer will not be happy to see 7 findings. If his application has 0 findings, he will be happy, more happy. But if he has 7 findings, he will be concerned that what else is there. Okay. So that is the idea here. After that, we create the test plan. This is the mapping of the threats to the technical risk. Now, you may say that this takes a lot of time. Is it not time consuming? Yes, it is time consuming, the creation of threat profile. Time consuming in the sense, let's say a typical internet banking application will take 1.5 days to create a threat profile. And getting it reviewed from the customer in a half day. So let's say 2-3 days is what it takes. But how does it help? It helps in providing a direction to the audit, a completeness to the audit, and essentially a structured audit. Okay, so that is where they and it is not only for application security, let's say network security or system vulnerability assessment or infrastructure audits. Essentially, we need to identify what and then decide on how. Once what is clear, we have a boundary. Okay, this is what. How do we know this what is complete? We get it reviewed, internally reviewed, reviewed from the customer. Right? That is how we do it. Plus, we can reasonably say that in our years of experience, we can at least not 100%, so at least between 90 to 100%, we can list down all the threats that are possible. Then we execute. Execution is either manual or tool based. As I said, manual testing will help us in finding business logic flaws. Tool based will not, because tool doesn't understand context. If I am displayed a login page of a normal user and a login page of an admin, I will be able to understand. Tool will not understand. Or else we have to build intelligence into the tool, which means we have to build a tool for each application. The admin page of Orkut may be different from admin page of Reddit. Tool doesn't know that, but a human knows that. Hence, manual testing is as important as tool-based testing. And based on the result of a certain manual test, the tester or the auditor can decide on what to do next. Whereas typically for business logic cases, tool cannot decide. Right? And in our report, this is what typically comes. The executive summary, which is for the top management, saying your application is safe in such case in so many things and unsafe in so many things, and these are the risk rating, high, medium, low. Then detailed description of findings with solutions and appendix. We baseline the findings today based on OWASP top 10. We do not use any other standard because that is the de facto standard. Alright, so this is overall about the thing. Alright, so this is my email ID. In case you have any questions, clarifications on either the topics we discussed or the couple of topics. There's another interesting discussion which has been there for last, I think, 1.5 years about STTP parameter pollution, which is again very interesting. You can go through it. I am sure that with these concepts, it will be a smooth walkthrough. So STP verb tampering, STP parameter pollution, and STTP response splitting. These 3 things. Can you just pass this? I will require 2 minutes again from all of you.